What's this? Just second and third-rate resumes, huh? No one from Harvard University, I see.
A Harvard University graduate interviewer said while looking at the resumes of job seekers who had come to the interview venue. He continued,
You know, I graduated from Harvard University. Get it? Unlike you guys, I'm top-notch.
He was boasting about being a Harvard University graduate. It wasn't clear if it was necessary for this interview, but he kept posing questions that seemed as difficult as the entrance exams for Stanford University or Harvard University. The job seekers at the venue were so overwhelmed by the difficulty that they hung their heads, unable to answer. Amidst this, I was answering all the questions. The interviewers seemed to take a dislike to me and started making unreasonable comments.
You're pretty cocky, huh? All right, solve this. If you can solve this, you're hired on the spot, and I'll give you $2 million.
He was thinking it impossible, with a smug look on his face as he handed over a piece of paper. The printout contained a math question written by hand. Looking at the question on the printout, I murmured just one word. Math, huh?
Well, I think it's impossible for someone with your caliber.
He probably wanted to say that there's no way I could beat him, a Harvard University graduate, but looking at the question in front of me, I confidently responded, You better get that $2 million ready now. The interviewer didn't yet understand the meaning of my confident words, and an unexpected fate awaited him. My name is Michael Johnson. I've grown up in an ordinary family, just an average person. Average in sports, average in studies. Neither good nor bad. Just average. If you asked my classmates, they'd probably say normal. Everyone considers me average, but in reality, there's one thing I'm truly confident in. That's a strong influence of my upbringing. I'm about to share a bit of that story. My family has run a store since my grandparents' generation. Coming home from kindergarten, it became a routine for me to help out in the store with my grandmother. Having watched my grandmother interact with customers since I was young, I was able to do mental arithmetic by the first grade. That'll be $13.69.
Oh, Michael, that's amazing. You can already do such difficult calculations.
While saying that, a regular customer pulled out two $10 bills. I took the money with a proud look and gave him the change. Here's $6.31 change.
You can even calculate the change. Wait, did you use a calculator just now?
No, it's mental math. Hearing that, the regular customer looked surprised.
That's impressive. Have you never used a calculator?
No, I haven't. My grandparents' store didn't have a cash register because they did all the calculations with an abacus. There wasn't any modern system like you'd find in supermarkets or convenience stores. I learned how to use the abacus and do calculations from my grandmother.
You've just started elementary school, right?
Yeah, I just entered this year.
Well, Michael, you're smart. Grandma, he's going to be promising in the future.
My grandparents always praised me, their proud grandson. Initially, I did calculations with the abacus I was taught to use. However, after seeing my grandmother calculate without using an abacus, I wanted to try it myself and asked her to teach me the tricks. It made me happy to be praised, so I helped out in the store every day, and mental arithmetic became fun for me. Even though I said I had learned mental arithmetic at the first grade level, there were still mistakes. I messed up again.
It's okay to make mistakes. Let's try it one more time.
Even so, my grandparents encouraged me to practice mental arithmetic. They praised me when my answers were correct. Initially, I continued because I was happy to be praised, but gradually, I began to enjoy doing the calculations. The feeling of numbers fitting together in my mind like a puzzle, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. The fact that there was always an answer was fascinating, and I enjoyed it as if I were playing a game. Before I knew it, doing calculations had become my area of expertise, and it has now become the one thing I am truly confident in. Having an area of expertise in mental arithmetic made me start wondering about many other things.
What's up? You've been staring at the sky for a while.
Yeah, I was wondering why the sky changes color.
You were thinking about something that difficult.
My mom was incredibly surprised by my unexpected question. Once something piqued my interest, I wanted to know the answer. Like with calculations, I wanted a clear answer. So, whenever something caught my interest, I would always ask my parents, grandparents, and homeroom teacher. My parents and teachers were happy about my curiosity and gladly taught me. If they could answer right away, they did so on the spot, and if they didn't know, they went as far as to research to teach me. Understanding something I didn't know felt the same as solving a calculation, and I found it fun, becoming more and more engrossed. Collecting knowledge became my hobby, and I was always asking why and how. I was nicknamed Teach Me Kid by those around me, mimicked and teased. But my curiosity never stopped, and by the time I was in 3rd grade, it had powered up even more. As the trivia king, I was respected within the school. The reasons why the sky changes color, why the shape of the moon changes, why rainbows have 7 colors, how clouds are formed, the characteristics of dinosaurs, the ecology of bugs, plants, and flowers, the constellations of the seasons and the myths associated with them. I learned anything and everything that interested me. There was anyone else my age who knew as much about everything as I did. Entering middle school, new subjects sparked my curiosity again. I enjoyed acquiring new knowledge, and the trivia I had accumulated so far somewhat helped, making it feel like the world was expanding. I always liked reading, but upon entering middle school, I enjoyed reading literature with a more sophisticated level of thought. I was particularly drawn to chemistry. The properties of substances, the concept of atoms, and scientific reactions in experiments were all fascinating. German was challenging at first. However, once I started reading novels in German, I naturally became able to read and write. The different grammar from English sparked my interest again. Although I hadn't delved deep into it during elementary school, learning more about history was also fun. Looking back at history, I could see how America came to be operated under its current system. The background of America's economic development, its connections with other countries, and the global influence America has. Unable to contain my curiosity, I read history books beyond the textbooks to study. Having been skilled at mental arithmetic, I was instantly captivated by mathematics when I encountered it. Mathematics is truly simple. There's always an answer. Even if the answer can't be divided evenly, it means there is an answer that can't be divided evenly. In other words, it doesn't end ambiguously. Regarding proof problems, the beauty of proving correctness appealed to me. Until now, I found joy in arriving at answers, using formulas to do so. And I thought the process of arriving at those answers was beautiful. The more problems I solved, the more I got engrossed in finding out which formulas would lead to elegant proofs. During my fun middle school days, I continued to help out at my grandparents' store as always. With my quick and error-free mental arithmetic, my grandparents came to rely on me confidently to manage the store. Studying mathematics at school and practicing mental arithmetic at my grandparents' store. Thanks to this lifestyle, my calculation skills had surpassed the middle school level. In my freshman year of high school, the math teacher, who was in charge, had to be hospitalized for a year due to illness. The temporary math teacher who came was a man named Kevin Martin. He appeared older due to his prematurely white hair but was a young 23-year-old teacher. His passion for mathematics was unmistakably evident. Because he loved it, his teaching was not mechanical, making it very understandable and fun.
High school classes, you have to use the formulas being taught to get the correct answers. Well, it's the most efficient way to solve problems. But I think it's also okay if you can find the answer taking a longer route.
Maybe I can talk to Mr. Martin easily. I felt a closeness to Mr. Martin and thought I might ask questions just like before whenever I didn't understand something. Mr. Martin, can I ask you something? I need help with this part.
Where is it? Oh, really? This is amazing.
Mr. Martin was surprised at the question I brought, perhaps because it was unexpectedly challenging. And for good reason. The question I brought wasn't from the textbook used in class or a reference book for freshmen. If it were at the freshman level, I wouldn't need to ask the teacher. I had already advanced my studies to the level that high school seniors study for entrance exams.
This is free official practice tests, isn't it? Are you studying from this?
Mr. Martin looked at the free official practice test with pleasure.
This brings back memories. I used to solve tests from free official practice tests too. So, what don't you understand?
Mr. Martin seemed to love mathematics. Seeing Mr. Martin's reaction, I felt relieved that my sense of closeness was not misplaced. I became even more immersed in mathematics than before. Mr. Martin taught mathematics in a very fun and understandable way. His slightly different perspective from other teachers overflowed my curiosity. Above all, Mr. Martin looked innocent and joyful when talking about mathematics. From then on, learning mathematics from Mr. Martin became a part of my daily routine. He recommended workbooks to me and even created his own. I thought the questions Mr. Martin made were very beautiful. I couldn't help but enjoy proving them. He also secretly taught me how to solve not covered in class. Mr. Martin made even the formulas and geometric questions I struggled with understandable, making mathematics even more enjoyable and captivating for me. One day, as usual, after school, I went to Mr. Martin, who seemed to be deep in thought. Hesitating to interrupt, I still spoke up. "Mr. Martin, I have something I'd like to learn today too."
Michael, right. All right, let's talk about mathematics today too.
Mr. Martin always talked about mathematics with enthusiasm. Whether his counterpart was a high school student, he couldn't help but be happy and enjoy talking about mathematics. A pure love for the subject was evident. Spending time talking about mathematics with the teacher after school became indispensable for me, and Mr. Martin and I transcended the teacher-student relationship to become comrades who loved mathematics. You really love mathematics, don't you, Mr. Martin?
That's the same for you, isn't it? Oh, yes. I have a favor to ask of you today.
As he said so, Mr. Martin took out a piece of copy paper and began writing on it with practiced ease. When he finished writing, he handed it to me.
Here, this is my request to you.
I was surprised when I saw his request. What was written there was not a math question.
Create an original math workbook by Michael Johnson and surpass the math teacher, Kevin Martin.
What is this? I was so surprised at the unexpected request that I was speechless. Ignoring my reaction, the teacher continued,
Michael, you've solved enough questions already. In terms of solving them, you're at the college level. That's why I want you to go beyond that. From being the solver, why not try becoming the creator of problems? I'm sure you'll find the world of mathematics expanding even more.
Becoming the creator, the world expanding.
Exactly. I can't let your talent go to waste. I want it to blossom. The world seen from the perspective of solving is different from that of creating. Of course, the world that becomes visible is different too.
Mr. Martin was passionately explaining,
I believe you, of all people, will surely discover the hidden fascinations of mathematics.
Mr. Martin trusts me that much. I wanted to respond to his trust, and I also wanted to see the fascinations of mathematics that I hadn't seen yet. Thank you. I'll give it a try.
All right. It won't be easy, but give it a go. I'm waiting for the questions you create, Michael.
After returning home, I immediately started on the homework, but it was harder than I thought. If it were about creating exercises for use in class, I could do it right away. However, the assignment this time was to create an ultra-difficult one that even Mr. Martin couldn't solve. Yet, despite finding it difficult, I also found it enjoyable. I became so engrossed in the homework that I went to school sleep-deprived. And after school, I hurriedly went to Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, I made it. What do you think? Mr. Martin took the sheet from me and checked it. However, he solved it quite easily. I thought so. You solved it. After my words, Mr. Martin said,
It's very well made. It's a very elegant. I can really tell how much you love mathematics. But, you know.
Mr. Martin looked a bit disappointed as he looked at my question. But, what is it?
You focused on making the question beautiful, and neglected its difficulty.
Exactly. He hit the nail on the head. Indeed, halfway through, I stopped considering the difficulty level, thinking that if I were to create a question, it should be beautiful. Seeing me looking down, somewhat disappointed and sad, Mr. Martin said,
However, to be able to create this much from the start is quite something. Next time, bring me a work you're confident in. I'm looking forward to Michael's challenge.
Yes, next time, I'll definitely impress you, Mr. Martin.
Good. That's the spirit.
I started creating again as soon as I got home. I was glad that Mr. Martin had expectations of me, and I think I began to feel the joy of creating exercises. However, I didn't want to make a question that was just difficult, beautiful and difficult. I worked on creating such every single day, and finally, it was completed. This has to be it. Full of confidence, I went to show it to Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin took a bit longer to solve it than the first one I presented. I thought that the fact he took some time to solve it meant it was a better question than the last one. However, Mr. Martin gave me a strict assessment.
Yes, it's a difficult one. It made me think a bit. You did well, but take another look at this.
Saying that, he showed me my question.
Did you notice anything?
I realized what he meant. It's not beautiful. I mean, it's messy.
Right, it can't be called beautiful. You were too focused on increasing its difficulty, weren't you? Unfortunately, I can't give a passing mark for this.
A question that would impress Mr. Martin was not easy to create. It wasn't enough for it to be just difficult. It also had to be beautiful. The quality of beauty and difficulty had to be maintained to create a question that was truly mine. I continued creating tirelessly, and before I knew it, 3 months had passed. Creating questions is this difficult, I was experiencing what Mr. Martin meant by the perspective of creating. Surely, not just anyone could do this, but he believed I could. To live up to that belief, I couldn't give up. And on the 35th attempt, this is it. I created a math question that felt right. I confidently went to show it him. Mr. Martin, I did it. He silently took the question I confidently handed him and began to solve it. As usual, he was swiftly solving. I watched intently as his pen danced across the paper. Then suddenly, Mr. Martin's dancing pen stopped.
Oh, Michael, this is incredible.
Incredible. What is it?
Ha. I'm stumped. I can't solve this. It's insolvable for me. You did it. Excellent job.
He was not frustrated that he couldn't solve it. He was delighted by it. I managed to create that even the Mr. Martin couldn't solve. Realizing what had happened, I jumped for joy with him. Yes, mission cleared.
This is fantastic. No matter from which angle you approach it, the solution doesn't reveal itself. It's difficult yet simple and beautiful. Is there really such a question? You've created something even better than I imagined. It's frustrating, but I'm even more pleased. Well done, Michael.
It's all thanks to you, Mr. Martin. If you hadn't suggested it, I would never have thought to create a math question. Mr. Martin and I fist bumped in a victorious pose. At this moment, Mr. Martin and I truly transcended the teacher-student relationship, becoming comrades who loved mathematics. The time and experiences shared with him gave me even more confidence. That much was certain. During the summer break of my freshman year in high school, Mr. Martin called me. "Mr. Martin, what's up?"
Sorry to bother you. I wanted to tell you as soon as possible.
He began with a slightly sad look. Apparently, Mr. Smith, who had been on medical leave, was returning to school earlier than expected. As a result, Mr. Martin would not be returning to school for the second term.
It's really sad to leave without saying goodbye to everyone. At least I wanted to tell you personally.
Facing the reality that I had to say goodbye to Mr. Martin was something I didn't want to accept. But it was already a decided matter. There was nothing I could do. I had no choice but to accept it. And there were other trials for me as well. It was decided that my grandparents' store would close. The place that could be called my origin, my grandparents' store. Mr. Martin, you elevated my math skills. Important things were suddenly gone. I felt a fierce sense of loneliness, as if I had lost my place as well. But right after that, there was no time to feel lonely. First, both my grandparents began showing symptoms of dementia. With both of them affected, caring for them at home became difficult for our family. Reluctantly, we had to admit my grandparents into a nursing home. After settling my grandparents into the facility and finally catching a breath, my father collapsed. He had a pre-existing condition, and his health wasn't great, but it worsened due to the stress of caring for my grandparents. He was admitted to the hospital unconscious. 6 months later, my father passed away. Left behind were just my mother and me. We couldn't sustain our lives as they were. We sold the building and land we used as our home and store. With that money, we rented a cheap apartment and decided to live there, just the two of us. Given our current financial situation, going to university seemed difficult. I decided to get a job instead of pursuing higher education. "Mom, I'll work after I graduate."
What are you talking about? I've saved enough for your expenses for university. Don't worry, and go to college.
My mother said, handing me a bank book in my name.
You've always said you wanted to go to university. You worked hard studying for it, right?
"Thank you, Mom. At least I'll go to a local public university. I'll also do part-time jobs to contribute to our living expenses." From then on, I devoted myself to studying for entrance exams and working part-time jobs. I didn't want to put all the burden on my mother. I worked hard to keep my grades up so I could receive scholarships for university, ensuring that, even if we couldn't afford luxuries, we could have a happy life supporting each other. Seeing my mother smiling in front of me, I seriously wondered if I should start working immediately, but I couldn't ignore her wish for me to go to university. In the end, I decided to attend the nearest local university from our home. Once I entered university, honestly, all I remember is studying and working part-time. I managed to complete all my credits in 3 years, dedicating the rest of my time to job hunting. This year, as a senior, everyone around me is also putting their full effort into job hunting. I, too, poured my energy into it without falling behind. I checked every company briefing and online session, actively participating. Honestly, I wasn't in a position to choose companies, but I had my non-negotiable conditions. I wanted to ease my mother's burden as much as possible, considering how much she had shouldered for me. I also planned to take on the responsibility for my grandparents' facility fees. I carefully checked not only the salary conditions but also the benefits and made my selections. I positively applied to the companies I had picked out. After applying to about 10 companies, I received an invitation for an interview from one. It's an hour by train from home. Remote work was an option if desired. It's a newly established IT company, but it offers internships. Thinking it was a pretty good offer, I decided to go for the interview anyway. Well, Mom, I'm off to the interview.
Okay, take care. Bye now.
I psyched myself up one last time while looking in the hallway mirror. Let's do this. I didn't intend to be nervous, but the unfamiliar dress suit and leather shoes seemed to heighten my anxiety. Looking back, I saw my mother sending me off with a gentle smile. My mother's smile eased my nerves a bit, and at the same time boosted my morale. Upon arriving at the interview venue, I saw a line of job-seeking peers at the reception. I joined the queue, completed the registration, and was then guided to the waiting area. About 10 minutes later, my name was called, and I headed to the room where the interview would be conducted. Entering the interview room, I introduced myself with my university and name. Although I thought I was accustomed to interviews from my part-time job experiences, I froze for a moment in the unfamiliar, tense atmosphere of the room. The interviewers were a man and a woman. Young-looking, but being interviewers, they must hold positions of responsibility. Especially the man, who looked at me as if appraising me with a scrutinizing gaze. The female interviewer prompted me to sit with a please, to which I responded with a thank you and bowed slightly before sitting down. As soon as I sat down, the male interviewer started talking.
Today, I'll be conducting the interview. I'm Miller.
He introduced himself quickly. His fast-paced speaking caught my attention, but my nervousness was more overwhelming. The female interviewer also introduced herself, and all of us job seekers greeted in unison.
Pleased to meet you.
After the greetings, I handed my resume to the interviewers. The interviewer, Mr. Miller, was carefully examining each page of the resume. My nervousness increased even more.
What's this? Just a bunch of second and third-rate stuff. Nothing impressive.
It was Mr. Miller's first comment after reading through the resumes. His unexpected remark shocked all the job seekers, leaving us speechless. The female interviewer beside him frowned and sighed in disapproval. The atmosphere in the interview room went completely silent. However, Mr. Miller continued unabated.
You know, I graduated from Harvard University. Get it? Unlike you guys, I'm from a top-tier university. I was hoping there would be someone else from such here, but no one, huh?
Apparently, Mr. Miller was the type to boast about academic backgrounds. Then, Mr. Miller started asking questions.
So, Mr. Michael, here's a question for you.
Yes, please go ahead.
How many prime numbers are there between 1 and 100?
I was surprised by the question. What does this have to do with a job interview? I had expected questions about self-introduction, self-promotion, or motivation for applying.
Huh? Can't answer. I guess that's to be expected from a second-tier university student.
Mr. Miller seemed to think I couldn't answer because I was silent. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, 31, 37, 41, 43, 47, 53, 59, 61, 67, 71, 73, 79, 83, 89, 97. There are 25 in total.
I guess you could answer that after all.
Mr. Miller, seemingly eager to maintain his superiority, threw another question at me.
Next question then. Deborah Reed was the wife of Benjamin Franklin. But do you know the name of her another husband?
Was he annoyed that I answered the previous math question? This time, he posed a history question. But for me, known as the Trivia King, it was an easy one. It's John Rogers. Mr. Miller clearly showed his frustration on his face. Yet, the questions didn't stop. He kept throwing questions at me that one wouldn't know just from attending classes, but I kept answering them correctly one after another. Mr. Miller seemed unable to contain his frustration any longer, his face turning red.
This is just.
He mumbled to himself while starting to write something on a notebook. Then, tearing a piece from the notebook, he said, "Solve this. There's no way you can, though." With an irritated tone and a flushed face, he handed me the torn piece of paper. He must have been quite annoyed. It took me a while to read the hastily scribbled question, but when I finally did, I was taken aback. Is this, maybe? Seeing my puzzled look, Mr. Miller smugly said,
What's the matter? Can't solve it? Well, that's expected. No way you can, coming from a second-tier university.
Mr. Miller, pleased with himself for getting the upper hand, continued,
If you solve this, you're hired on the spot. I'll even prepare a $2 million signing bonus for you.
Mr. Miller must have thought it was impossible for me to solve. That at my university level, it was absolutely out of question. He must have been certain of it. Indeed, it was a difficult question. Most people seeing it for the first time wouldn't be able to solve it. However, I knew this question. Mr. Miller, please don't go back on your word about the immediate hiring. Oh, and you might want to start preparing the $2 million right now. Mr. Miller, thinking I was just bluffing, didn't take me seriously. But I finished answering in a minute and returned the paper to Mr. Miller. He was surprised at both my confidence and the speed of my response, and even more so upon seeing my answer.
What? How did you?
Is my answer correct? My words seemed to bring back his frustration. You just guessed, right? There's no way that's correct. Do you know the answer to this question?
Huh? What are you talking about?
I don't know where you found this, but I created it when I was in high school. There's no way I wouldn't know the answer. Where did you learn about this, Mr. Miller? Only my mentor and I should know about it. I said while looking over the question. Let me ask again. When did you learn about this? Mr. Miller, biting his lip, remained silent and looked down. Suddenly, the door to the room opened, and a man walked in. The moment I saw him, I was filled with nostalgia and joy. What, Mr. Martin? Is that you, really?
President, why are you here?
It was Mr. Martin, my high school math mentor and fellow math enthusiast. I had researched the company's website before the interview, and the president's name was listed differently. But Mr. Miller called Mr. Martin the president. I was shocked and speechless.
Michael, it's been a while.
It's been a long time. I had no idea Mr. Martin was the president. It turned out, after his stint as a temporary high school teacher, Mr. Martin joined the company through mid-career recruitment. With his brilliant mind, Mr. Martin made a significant impact at the company and was appointed president this spring. It had just been a short while since his inauguration, so the website still listed the previous president. That made sense. So that's why Mr. Miller knew about that math problem.
By the way, Mr. Miller, I wanted to ask, was it necessary for our company's interview to include math and history trivia?
Number that is.
I don't recall writing anything like that in the interview manual I created. Can you explain why you decided to ignore the manual?
Well, I thought it would be a good way to gauge if someone is truly talented.
I see. That's commendable, your enthusiasm as an interviewer. Thank you. However, excellence isn't determined by academic background alone. Talented individuals exist regardless of their education, like Mr. Michael here.
After a pause, President Martin continued,
Even if someone graduated from a prestigious university, judging abilities solely based on academic background doesn't make them excellent. You understand, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller was left speechless by President Martin's words. He was hanging his head in silence.
Sorry to interrupt the interview. Let me take a look at everyone's resumes.
With that, the president reviewed all the job seekers' resumes.
Everyone has impressive backgrounds. All of you here are passed for the first round. I can't promise a signing bonus, but I'd like you to take the second round as well.
A few days later, I passed the first round. I received a notification for the second round. Although I was a bit puzzled by the presence of people like Mr. Miller, thinking that President Martin was in charge gave me confidence that it would be a fulfilling place to work. I smoothly advanced through the second and third rounds, finally reaching the day of the final exam, a meeting with the president. The president was Mr. Martin. I was nervous, but our conversation ended up revolving around mathematics, just like old times. Was this all right? I wondered, but soon after, I received a notification of my successful application. I successfully joined the IT company presided over by President Martin. It wasn't because I was acquainted with President Martin that I was given preferential treatment or through any connections. I followed the proper procedures and secured the job offer through my own abilities. Mr. Miller, now a senior colleague in the same department, no longer boasted about his academic background. Working together, I realized Mr. Miller was actually very competent. As seniors and juniors, we could talk easily, and I asked him why he brought up academic backgrounds. Mr. Miller mentioned that many of the younger generation have a wealth of knowledge in computers and often surpass him in skill. It seems his actions stemmed from a defensive mindset, not wanting to be underestimated by new employees. Hearing this, I found Mr. Miller somewhat endearing. He's now the senior colleague I trust the most in the company. I aim to become someone who can stand shoulder to shoulder with President Martin someday. With a reliable senior like Mr. Miller, I look forward to improving and honing my skills together.
Make sure to check the documents and then summarize them in a report.
What is this?
After working for decades, can you even do a simple document check?
Really? Just because he's the manager, why does he feel the need to talk down to everyone? There's something to be said for professionalism. No, even basic human decency. To think he made it to become a manager without being able to use formal language.
If you've got it, make sure it's done by today.
No, as I said before, I have other things I need to do.
That doesn't matter. If you can follow my orders, I'll have to fire you.
Fired? Does he really think I'll just do as he says? It's not like I'm rebelling just because he's younger. If it were truly necessary work, I'd take it on without complaint. But the documents he handed me were from the back shelf. And they're from 5 years ago. Why summarize documents for a company we've already ceased dealing with? It was a waste of time, and I had no intention of playing along with this farce.
Hey, did you get those documents summarized? You promised to submit them yesterday. Why haven't I seen them yet? Do you need to be told to do everything?
I haven't done anything with the documents. As I said yesterday, I have no intention of wasting my time.
So you're saying you can follow the orders of your manager?
If you're going to wield your power as the manager like that, then please do the job of a manager properly. Is assigning meaningless tasks something you think a manager should be doing? I made my stance clear. Then,
Oh, if you're going to speak to me like that, I'll show you what a manager's job is. We don't need old-timers like you. You're fired.
my name is John. I'm currently 63 years old. I'm still working, but now work is all I have left. I had a wife who was of the same age, but lost her in a car accident 20 years ago. Since we had no children, I've been alone ever since. But working kept me motivated and needed by the company and its president. 45 years ago, just after graduating high school, I was living by doing part-time jobs. Welcome, just you today.
Actually, I'm expecting 3 team members. Could we get a table?
Certainly. I was working part-time at a steakhouse. The pay wasn't great, but the owner was a really nice guy, so I enjoyed my life. This shop was quite established, with 80% regular customers. Thanks to those regulars, the business was sustainable. But one day, the owner called me over.
I'm sorry to spring this on you suddenly, but I'm thinking of closing the shop at the end of this year.
What?
The customers have been dwindling year by year, and I'm reaching my physical limits. I'm sorry, but you'll need to look for a new job.
I was honestly taken aback by this sudden news from the owner. Sure, I knew the shop would close eventually since he hadn't taken any apprentices. But I hadn't expected it to come this soon. I had never thought about the future, couldn't even imagine doing anything other than working there. I knew the day would come, but the owner gave me a 6-month notice. From that day, I started looking for a job, but it wasn't going well.
Today I'm alone, so I'll take the counter seat, please.
Understood. That day, a regular customer, a company president, came in, and I seated him at the counter. As usual, I served water and a towel, then let him enjoy his steak. It was the same service as always.
Can't find a job.
Why?
I heard from the owner about closing the shop. You'll be out of a job, right?
Yay, that's right. With just a high school diploma and no real skills, it's been tough finding someone willing to hire me.
How about joining us then, as a part-timer? If you show good results, I'll make it a full-time position.
I doubted my ears for a moment. Was this person serious? He's talking about hiring me with no skills and just a high school education? That seemed like a risk. But are you sure about me?
The owner has been taking care of me for a long time. He consulted me about you. I can just stand by and do nothing, right?
The owner had gone to the back to get some ingredients and wasn't there, but to think he was this concerned about me? The owner did.
I believe in the importance of connections between people. I became good friends with you here, which must be fate. I want to extend a helping hand to a young person who is willing to try hard. When I started my company, the owner helped me out with a lot of advice, and I knew it would come back around someday.
The president's words resonated with me. Connections between people. The owner was good to the president, so the president was good to me. Is that how the chain reaction works? I naturally accepted it and decided not to waste the opportunity the president had given me. After that, I started working at the president's company as soon as the owner's shop closed. Thank you. I'm looking forward to working with you.
It'll be different from working at the steakhouse, but do your best, okay?
I'll do my best to meet your expectations. The president trusted me, and I worked hard to live up to that trust. Of course, I had never done sales before, so at first, I really struggled to get results. But thanks to the training provided by my colleague and the support from my owner, I quickly grew as a salesperson and was able to produce decent results a year after starting. After that, I created new sales opportunities and used those connections to secure more and more contracts. President, it's just a 3-month contract for now, but I managed to secure a deal with Smith Industries.
Really?
They said they'd consider future dealings based on our performance over these 3 months, so let's keep up the good work. I studied hard while working on how to secure contracts and gain trust, and with each experience, I came to understand various things. Thanks to that, I was able to secure some significant contracts for the company, and I truly enjoyed my work. Then, one day when I was 30, the president called me in.
Sorry for calling you in suddenly. I wanted to talk to you about a promotion.
A promotion.
You've performed beyond my expectations, and I see you as a necessary asset for our company's future. So, I was thinking, how about taking on a managerial position? Having someone with your track record in charge could help the company grow.
A managerial position. I was genuinely pleased with the offer of a promotion and would have accepted it immediately under normal circumstances. However, I still wanted to work on the front lines. I considered my job in sales to be my true calling. I pride myself on my communication skills and my ability to win trust and secure contracts more than anyone else. That's why I wanted to work where I could fully utilize those skills. Thank you. Being offered a promotion is truly an honor, but I want to continue working in sales for this company. Also, after observing my colleagues and owners, I don't think I'm cut out for managing people.
I see. If that's how you feel, how about a raise instead? Anyway, I'm happy as long as you're willing to work for the company. Let's keep up the good work.
Of course. I owed a lot to the president for helping me, and I had always intended to work my hardest for the company. Of course, the fact that he offered me a promotion meant he recognized my efforts. That shows I've made an impact, and I was happy just to have that conversation. And I plan to continue producing results and contributing to the president and the company. After all, I was picked up by the president. I was determined to repay that favor over a lifetime. That was my feeling. And so, I continued to deliver results, and before I knew it, 10, 20, 30 years had passed. In that time, I got married, and 20 years ago, I lost my wife in an accident. Throughout the tough times in my life, I was always helped by those around me, and somehow I managed to keep going without losing sight of my life. Even at this age, some might find me odd, not having been promoted and still working as a regular sales employee, but I enjoyed my work and wanted to repay the favor in my own way. Then one day,
I've been appointed as the new manager starting today, so I'm counting on everyone. The overall sales performance has been declining, so I'm here to make some reforms.
the previous manager had retired and a new one in his 30s had been brought in. He had worked at a company known to the president, and his capabilities were well regarded. But from day one, he declared significant reforms.
First off, there are too many employees in the sales department. We'll be trimming the unnecessary force. Of course, those who haven't been performing are included, but the primary target will be the older employees with no future here, so just be prepared.
Our workforce was relatively young, but it's true there were salespeople in their 40s and 50s. Maybe he was referring to me, now in my 60s. I had that thought, but there was no use worrying about every little thing. Besides, I had a major task ahead of me. For that reason, I didn't have the time to seriously listen to this young manager's talk. That's what I thought, but...
Hey, what are you doing?
What? I'm preparing for the next negotiation.
Do you not realize that's pointless? Didn't you listen to what I said earlier? Or is your hearing so bad you didn't hear it?
If I stay silent, he just goes on. But getting angry at someone more than 2 decades younger isn't worth it. What I need to focus on isn't getting upset, but producing results through my work. I plan to deliver results on the project I'm working on until retirement. That's what I had decided. I have things to do. Is that all right with you?
That's what I'm saying. You don't have any work to do. What job can an old person do? Seriously? Can't you even understand that?
Sure, I'm nearing retirement, but what does he know about me? That's the problem with young people these days. Yet, it's something I don't want to say. That's exactly what an old person would say. Still, I don't want to be criticized by people not understanding what work I do or the achievements I've contributed to this company for things they know nothing about. Don't worry, I won't be a burden. I'll just do my job.
This is why I hate stubborn old people. Staying as a regular employee without being promoted until this age speaks for itself, doesn't it?
What?
You're still a regular employee because you can't do the job, right?
So that's the misunderstanding. To someone who knows nothing, I might indeed seem like a regular employee who couldn't get promoted, a useless one at that. It wouldn't be surprising if he thought that way. The company can't fire me even if they wanted to because of lifetime employment. That's probably what he thinks. However, there's probably no one in the company who thinks that way except for this manager. If he understood what kind of work I do, maybe his attitude towards me would change. That's what I thought. However,
Well, if you really want to work that badly, I'll give you something to do. Here, check these documents and summarize them in a report.
what is this?
After decades of work, you can even do a document check.
It's not that. Why do I have to do document checking? I thought this kind of work was done by the administrative staff.
Are you trying to go against me, the manager? You've got some nerve. Or do you think you're better just because you're older?
Really? Just because he's the manager, why does he feel entitled to talk down to me like that? Indeed, hierarchical relationships are necessary. But before that comes professional manners. No, even basic human decency. Can't he understand something so simple? It's surprising he made it to become a manager without being able to use even formal language.
If you've got it, finish it by today.
No, like I said before, I have things I need to do.
That doesn't matter. If you can't follow my orders, I'll have to fire you.
Fired. Fired? Did he really think I would just comply? Of course, I'm not resisting because he's younger. If it were truly necessary work, I would take it on without complaint. But the documents he handed me were from the back shelf. And they're from 5 years ago. Why summarize documents for a company we've already ceased dealing with? It was a waste of time, and I had no intention of playing along with this farce.
Just get to work already.
He left after saying that, but I had more important work to do. I needed to prepare for negotiations and didn't want to waste time on such trivial matters. Fortunately, my desk is out of the manager's sight, and I spent the day working on my own tasks. The next day,
Hey, did you get those documents summarized? You promised to submit them yesterday. Why haven't I seen them yet? Do you need to be told to do everything?
I haven't done anything with the documents. As I said yesterday, I have no intention of wasting my time.
So you're saying you can follow the orders of your manager?
If you're going to wield your power as the manager like that, then please do the job of a manager properly. Is assigning meaningless tasks something you think a manager should be doing? Knowing his personality, I was aware that saying this would only make him angry. But staying silent would only escalate things further, and I have no intention of wasting my precious time until retirement on such trivialities. However, my words seemed to have ignited his fury completely. He lost all composure, his face turned red, and he shouted at me.
Oh, if you're going to say that, then I'll show you what a manager's job is. We don't need old-timers like you. You're fired.
Are you making decisions based on your emotions? Isn't that the last thing someone in a managerial position should do?
You disobeyed your superior, so it's only natural, right? As a manager, I have the right to fire you. Pack your things and leave today.
I hadn't expected him to go this far in his anger. But he seemed serious. What a problem. I've never dealt with someone like this before. But I understood his personality then. Continuing to argue logically with him was pointless. If you insist, I'll leave immediately. What about the handover?
Your work is trivial and unnecessary. No one needs it, so there's nothing to hand over. What are you even talking about?
That's my line. What was he talking about? I wish he would stop being so selfish. Was that also an order from the manager? Since he said there was no need for a handover, then I won't do anything. So, you're saying there's no need for a handover?
Of course. It's better for us if an old-timer like you disappears quickly.
Understood? Since that's what he wanted, I left as he wished. But whatever happens next is not my concern. I was fired by the manager. It's up to him to fill the gap I leave. Understood. In that case, I'll leave the succession and everything else in your hands. With that, I'll take my leave.
Leave. Someone like you is better off quietly enjoying retirement at home.
I couldn't help but be amazed at the manager looking down on me until the very end, but that's just his character. People like him don't change because you say something. It's a waste of time and effort to even try. So I'll just do as he says. As he put it, I'm just a regular employee. And I got fired for defying the manager. That's all there is to it. However, I wonder if the other employees realize how bad it is for me to be leaving in this manner. Before I could leave the company, I was stopped.
Are you really going to leave?
I got fired, so I have to. But it seems the new manager will take care of everything, so don't worry.
But
If you ever have any trouble with work, feel free to reach out to me. You can always contact me. I said this and left, but my colleague looked quite anxious. It's understandable. But my place is no longer at the company, so it can't be helped. I thought of it as an early retirement as I reached home. I need to say goodbye to the president too, but I decided to wait and see. I just couldn't believe that this was the end of it. A week later.
Hey, who's handling this $1 billion deal?
that would be John. Have you forgotten? You fired him last week because he was old.
What? He was in charge of such an important deal. No wonder the performance wasn't improving. It's all because the old folks were covering for each other.
Even after I was gone, it seemed the manager had been bad-mouthing me, but I couldn't care less. What he thinks of me doesn't matter anymore. Let him say what he wants. However, I had been waiting quietly for a week. I knew exactly what would happen because I was in charge of that deal.
So, what are you going to do?
Don't worry, I'll handle it myself.
Apparently, the manager went to meet with my former client. There was a scheduled negotiation that day. Of course, since he said he would take over everything, I left all the documents with him. But whether he could handle the negotiation was questionable.
Nice to meet you.
Hello, isn't John coming today?
Yes, I am Bob Tyler, the new manager. He retired last week, so I'll be taking over.
The moment he said that, the faces of our clients tensed. They must have been wondering why I didn't show up. They must have been quite surprised. Naturally, you'd properly say goodbye to your clients before leaving. I had built a strong relationship with them, so they were likely shocked by the lack of communication from me.
Hello.
Thank you for calling.
I'm sorry to call suddenly. I heard you retired. Is that true?
The client stepped out and then contacted me. They must have never imagined I would leave my job without any notice. Rather than saying I retired, it's more accurate to say I was fired.
Fired?
The new manager who's there with you, he decided to start firing older employees. I explained everything the manager had said to me. The client was quite surprised but listened to my story to the end and understood. In this day and age, it's unheard of for someone to be fired in such a manner, so they must have been bewildered. But the fact that they believed me without any doubt shows how much trust I had earned from them.
So that's the situation. Understood. We'll start the negotiation now, and I'll get back to you later.
I'm truly sorry for ending things this way. It was irresponsible of me, and I apologize.
No need to apologize. It's not your fault. But rest assured, we'll make sure he takes full responsibility.
The client said this and then hung up. I could somewhat predict what would befall that manager after this, but it seemed things turned out far worse than I had imagined.
Could you please leave now?
Excuse me. I thought we were here to discuss the renewal of our contract. Is there a problem with the documents?
That's why I'm asking you to leave. We had you come today to discuss the renewal, but we have no intention of renewing our contract. Dismissing people unjustly and creating a workplace as you please is a clear abuse of power. We cannot do business with a company that allows such people.
The moment the client said this, the manager was at a loss for words. He might not have understood exactly what was happening, but he must have understood the client knew he was abusing his power. The manager must have been struggled then to be confronted with such accusations by a client he thought knew nothing. How did you know about this? And if we don't renew the contract, it will be my responsibility. I imagine the manager was swamped with various anxieties, but this was just the beginning.
Given my long-standing relationship with your company's president, I'll ensure your case is thoroughly reviewed. The position of a division head in a large corporation is significant. After all, if the top fails, everything below crumbles.
Please wait. What exactly are you talking about? I don't understand. And if we don't renew the contract, I'll be in trouble. Please.
We would have considered renewing the contract if someone like you hadn't shown up. But we can't trust you. Business is built on trust. We had trust in the person who was handling our account before, not you. Perhaps if another salesperson had come, we might have considered it, but we can't trust someone who makes unjust dismissals.
Hearing the words unjust dismissal repeatedly, the manager must have finally understood his situation. It was revealed that he had unjustly dismissed me. And from the client's words, it was clear how much trust I had garnered and how much I had contributed to the company. And then, he probably understood just how much of a positive impact I could have had on the company if I were still there.
Please wait. I never thought you and he had such a relationship. The company's performance was declining. I thought the only option was to downsize the workforce with no future.
You tried to reduce expenses for the company's sake, so it wasn't for personal gain or out of emotion, but purely for the company's benefit.
Of course, I wouldn't do something like that for personal reasons. That would be an abuse of power. I believe I understand my role as a manager.
The manager might have seen this as a way out of the dire situation. From the brink of hell, a fragile thread dangled down. That's the situation, I believe. He was determined to cling to that thread and escape hell at all costs. With that mindset, the manager frantically continued making excuses, unaware that those very excuses were tightening the noose around his own neck.
So, let me ask you one question. Who do you think is the least necessary person for the company in the current situation?
The least necessary person? That would be those who haven't produced results, I guess.
Not producing results doesn't mean there's no potential. New employees can't produce results immediately, and nurturing them is the job of the company and management.
A wrong answer could sever the thread to escape from hell. The manager scrambled to find the answer the client wanted. But there is no way the manager can answer such a question.
Cutting the upper management's salaries. Would that be the best answer?
A business is about money, and those who work primarily for money won't put in their best effort without compensation, especially not the upper management whose responsibilities and workload only increase.
Then,
it's not about those who don't produce results, but about eliminating negative elements like you. Removing the negatives naturally improves the company. Don't you think so? That's what you said and thought you did, right? Removing the least necessary people is truly the best approach.
Confronted by the client's words, the manager was shocked. He hadn't expected to be criticized like this. Promoted to become a manager at a young age, he must have felt quite pleased with himself. But merely stepping on others doesn't make one a competent manager. I continued working in sales until this age precisely because I was trusted with the company's most significant deals. Though I say it was entrusted to me, I was the one who got the deal sealed. Someone who fires someone else just for being old, without understanding the value of experience, isn't fit to be a manager. Being unfit for the role means getting paid as a manager is a waste. New employees or those with lesser skills aren't expected to carry such heavy responsibilities. However, if one earns a high salary and bears the title of manager, they must be stripped of their position if they fail to fulfill their duties.
You get what I'm saying, right? Since you tried to do the same thing, now that you're on the receiving end, you can say you don't understand, right?
no, that's not.
Got any excuses? I'm wrong.
It's not that, but
Then you know what to do, right? What should be done for the company's sake.
The manager likely didn't expect such confrontation. He turned pale and fell silent. But it was the manager himself who clearly stated that unnecessary people for the company should be fired. Then, it's imperative to see that executed. If the manager was then considered the most unnecessary within the company, and if his own statements hold true, then he should be the one to resign.
but I have a family.
Weren't you acting for the company's sake? Are you going to bring personal issues into this?
That's
Or are you going to admit that firing John was for personal reasons and not for the company's benefit?
I thought old people were useless. I'm really sorry.
The manager finally admitted his wrongdoing. My dismissal was unjust. While anyone could see this, the admission that mattered most needed to come from him.
All right, I'll report this to the president. Take care.
No, please.
That's all from me.
The client then dismissed the manager. According to the president, the client called later to relay everything. Consequently, the president decided to demote the manager. Upon hearing this, the manager was outraged, but the president detailed my hiring and efforts. The president believed in the manager and hired him, feeling pity for him after losing his job due to his acquaintance's company going bankrupt. The president had given the manager a chance out of sympathy, seeing a bit of me in him. However, focused only on results, the manager faced demotion due to his anger. It was his own doing. It couldn't be helped. I appreciated the president's opportunity and worked hard to repay that kindness. The manager took his position for granted. By then, the outcome was already decided. Later, the president contacted me, and I was able to return to the company. Busy since my return, I've committed to fulfilling my duties. The connections between people can sometimes greatly influence one's life. That's why it's crucial to value those connections, or life may take a turn for the worse. To prevent that, I want to live my life, never forgetting the kindness shown to me.
Useless old farts like you are a wasted cost. You're fired.
The newly transferred younger branch manager, Dave, was a jerk who forced his employees to work unreasonably. As we approached the busy season, I decided to negotiate with Dave, who imposes unreasonable quotas without considering everyone's workload, to see if we could reduce our workload. However, Dave wouldn't hear of it, saying he'd consider it only if I apologized in front of everyone. I understood. I have no choice but to apologize in front of my colleagues. Despite enjoying the spectacle, Dave reneged on his promise. I've put up with Dave's tyranny until now, but it seems this is the end. I chose to resign, dedicating myself to work until my last day. My name is William, 51 years old. My occupation is a banker. My hobby is visiting cafes. A cup of coffee to take a break from work is my favorite part of the day. Having worked in banking since my 20s, I've surpassed 30 years of service. While banking might seem elite and high-earning, it's actually gritty and incredibly demanding. Frequent relocations are common for bankers, usually for fraud and collusion prevention. However, directives from the Financial Services Agency have recently reduced these transfers. I agree that there will be fewer transfers because I thought it would be a hassle to move within a few years due to the transfer and to greet the transfer. I have been working at a branch close to the headquarters for more than 5 years, so I have more familiar faces and customers. However, business remains as busy as ever, and sometimes young bankers leave the company because of the intense workload. At this age, despite higher salary and rank showing personal growth, the intense work and hierarchical pressure have me contemplating a career change. Should I continue working as a bank teller until retirement, or should I take on something else that I want to do? Lately, I've been constantly thinking about my future. In April, a significant transfer brought in Dave as the new branch manager. He's a man who, at the young age of 43, was promoted to branch manager after serving as an assistant branch manager at the previous branch. In a bank where seniority mattered since the announcement of his transfer, his quick promotion had become a topic of discussion among the staff. I heard that Dave was so good that he got a bank award for getting contracts one after another at his previous branch. Our branch, being close to headquarters, is busier, especially with paperwork leading to overtime. We all had high hopes for Dave's leadership. Those hopes were dashed.
I'm Dave, the new branch manager. Don't expect any kindness from me. Everyone works overtime until all meet their quota.
His greeting was a display of arrogance. Being a banker is a demanding job, where even small mistakes can lead to significant losses. That's why supervisors always have to stay on their toes and closely monitor their bankers' work. Dave, too, seemed to be speaking from a place of responsibility.
Hey, you! What's with this incomprehensible report? What happened to your language skills?
I am sorry.
While working on paperwork, Dave suddenly lashed out at a young banker. Dave always sports a sales smile in front of customers. But in front of us, his smile fades and he glares at us like a demon. It was not just a work supervision, but a search for trouble. When he finds the slightest mistake by a banker, he yells at him quite over the top. Even now, he was stingy with reports filled out by a young banker and went out of his way to call them in.
Rewrite this and bring it back.
Yes, sir.
The young banker, tasked with rewriting, looked disheartened. He's not the only one. Especially, the young bankers seem to have caught Dave's attention, and I witnessed scenes where even minor things are blamed. For example, if there is a mistake in the reinspection of documents, he nitpicks and orders a reinspection after confirming that there are no mistakes. The confirmation of no mistakes, such a wasteful clerical task, was frustrating for the bankers. However, if you resist Dave even a little, you'll end up with extra work and overtime, so there was no choice but to obediently follow orders. As a senior banker, I tried to build a relationship between Dave and the bank staff, but the distance between them still did not seem to be getting any closer. Dave's issues don't stop there. Is this just scribbles? Scribbling on important documents?
That's Manager Dave's signature.
Ever since Dave was transferred here, these kinds of interactions have happened many times. Dave is the owner of incredibly messy handwriting. Dave's handwriting is difficult to read, and sometimes it's completely indecipherable like before. At its worst, the ink from his pen would smudge on the paper, making it so frustrating, it felt like tearing it apart. When it was indecipherable, collaborating with other bankers to somehow decipher, it was part of our job. Yet, no one dared to point out Dave's terrible handwriting for fear of being targeted and harassed by him. Moreover, the branch manager had a certain degree of authority over personnel, and opposing him could affect internal transfers and performance evaluations.
Dave's handwriting is the messiest in the branch, but in contrast, William's is really neat.
Oh, really? That's great. Thank you.
Everyone says your handwriting is beautiful. Sometimes we even use it as a model.
I can help but be embarrassed when a junior banker praises me so much. Then, other bankers who overheard our conversation also complimented my neat and skilled handwriting. As everyone was asking me for tips on writing beautifully, I heard Dave clearing his throat. Turning towards the sound, I saw Dave standing imposingly, glaring at me.
You seem to be much admired by your colleagues, William.
Branch manager Dave. Dave saw me in an awkward moment.
I don't know whose handwriting is bad, but are you happy being fawned over for something like that?
I'm overwhelmed. Dave hadn't heard the part about himself. It was a relief, but Dave seemed displeased, seeing me surrounded by my bankers. All bankers had darkened their expressions at Data's appearance.
If you have time to chat, get back to work.
Yes, sir. Dave's command dispersed us. Interacting with Dave made one thing clear. He resented me for being admired by the bankers. Since noticing Dave's jealousy, I felt uneasy chatting with colleagues, as if being glared at. Unfortunately, I was marked by a troublesome man and lamented inwardly. To climb the corporate ladder or survive in this hierarchical society, one must ingratiate themselves with those above. Everyone was desperately trying not to upset Dave. Since Dave's transfer, the workplace felt very constrained, making it increasingly difficult for me to work here. A few months after Dave's arrival, the hot season approached. As we entered the busy season, the workload was significantly heavier than usual. The other bankers were also showing signs of fatigue. Our stress only increased without even a proper break for coffee. Yet, in the midst of this busy period, Dave would force us to attend drinking parties.
Anyone who doesn't attend will have their performance review marked down at headquarters. A lower evaluation affects not just promotions, but also salary assessments.
It was unclear how serious Dave was, but unable to oppose his threats. We attended the drinking parties exhausted after work. Concerned about the potential for mistakes, I decided to negotiate with Dave to reduce each person's workload. Everyone agreed with my opinion.
Please do it for us, William.
I'll try to negotiate. I decided to call Dave to a secluded place and negotiate with him. I was concerned that if Dave lost his temper in front of the bankers, it would scare everyone and disrupt our work.
What do you want, William? I'm busier than you. Just say what you need.
When it was just the two of us, Dave openly showed his displeasure. I wanted to complain about the sarcastic look on his face, but I didn't call him to argue. Thank you for your time. I have a sincere request. I directly appealed to Dave to reduce the workload per person. This is not just from me, but a collective request from everyone. We don't want to push you, but continuing like this might lead to mistakes. I calmly tried to negotiate with Dave, but he remained silent with his arms folded. Pop. As I tentatively spoke, Dave glared at me sharply.
So, you called me here for this. Stop wasting time on such trivialities and get back to work.
Dave dismissed our plea outright. I got frustrated and stopped him as he was about to leave the place. Please wait. Even just reducing the after-work drinking would help. Everyone is working hard. Please let them go home early and rest. I pleaded earnestly. Dave then smirked, looking at me.
You're over 50, right, William? You're the elder of this branch. It must be tough being relied on by bankers, only when convenient.
That's not true. I rely on them too. Dave changed the subject abruptly, leaving me confused about his point.
You think you're a dependable boss, but it's because of people like you that the younger ones don't grow.
What are you suddenly talking about? I haven't done anything. Dave interrupts me and sticks his finger in my face.
Useless old farts like you are a wasted cost. You're fired.
I couldn't comprehend being told such a thing just for negotiating.
If you don't want to be fired, say it to me in front of everyone. Please let us take a break.
Dave intended to humiliate me in front of everyone. I guess he doesn't like that I, the elder one, am adored by colleagues. How far will he go in ridiculing someone? I was furious, but returning to my colleagues without achieving anything felt pathetic. If I really apologize, will you do me a favor?
Maybe.
I understood. I responded tersely. Despite the vague promise, thinking my submission might ease everyone's burden, I returned with Dave to face the staff. Then I apologized to Dave in front of everyone. Unaware of the situation, they were shocked to see me suddenly apologize.
What are you doing, William?
Ignoring their surprise, Dave looked down at me.
How hilarious.
The sound of a camera shutter came. I saw Dave recording me with his phone. "Stop it with the camera, Manager Dave."
Don't you have something to say to me? Otherwise, our deal is off.
Reluctantly, at Dave's insistence, I voiced out, "Please, reduce everyone's workload." My voice sounded choked. I apologized in front of all the bankers, my face almost on fire with embarrassment and misery.
All right, that's enough entertainment.
"So, you'll consider our request." To make everyone's job easier, I followed Dave's unpleasant orders. I genuinely hoped he would grant our request.
Did I say I'd grant it?
Stunned by Dave's response, I realized my efforts were in vain. I clenched my fists and glared at Dave. "I can no longer follow you. I will submit my resignation and leave at the end of this month. If I'm going to be fired, I'd rather quit myself." I chose to resign myself rather than be fired.
Are you really quitting? After all the hard work you've put in, you're willing to throw away your career?
Dave seemed amused to hear I was quitting. "I prefer to work closely with our customers rather than pursuing promotion. What's important to me in my job is earning the trust of our customers and becoming their best partner." I'll never forget the thrill of a financially struggling customer to whom I'd lent money to get their business on track. That's where I found my satisfaction in being a banker all these years. Not everyone is driven by a desire for advancement. That was my counter-argument. Dave seemed annoyed by my calm demeanor and scowled.
If you're so eager to quit, then quit.
"Yes, I will. Though my time with you as manager was short, thank you for your guidance." I returned to my desk. Seeing what had happened, my colleagues were visibly shocked and quickly gathered around me.
William, are you really leaving? Without you, there's no one to stand up to the manager.
Their eyes pleaded with me not to go. Some were new transfers, but I felt sorry for all the friendly faces. However, my mind was made up. From now until my last day, there are various things that need to be done. Saying goodbye to the customers I was responsible for and handing over my duties to another banker, quitting doesn't mean the workload gets any lighter. When I made my final farewell, the reality of leaving my long-term job hit me. On my last day as a banker, I worked harder than ever before. I smoothly handled the teller services and office tasks, and it was just a few hours away from the end of my tenure as a banker.
A $100 million account canceled. What's going on?
Dave's sudden outburst left everyone stunned. "Manager, what's wrong with your sudden loud voice?"
A major client called to suddenly close their account.
The manager was visibly panicked. The figure of $100 million struck a chord with me. When I mentioned the name of the major client, it turned out to be the very same customer. That customer was under my care.
What?
In fact, I had been handling a major client who favored me. I became responsible for this client on my first day at this branch. The customer initially came to the bank to get a loan for starting a business. Back then, starting from scratch, our trust was thin, but I continued to provide supportive service, hoping their business would succeed. 6 months after receiving the loan, fortunately, the business took off successfully. The primary client was pleased to have trusted me, and from there, they steadily increased their performance, now being the president of a corporation with sales exceeding $70 billion. It was quite challenging, but they have repaid all the borrowed money. Since then, we've built a strong relationship of trust, and the client expressed a desire not to change their representative aside from me. Of course, I have already informed them of my resignation. They were very sorry to hear it, but encouraged me by saying they would help if I ever needed it. And I remembered they said they would move their money to another bank if I was no longer their account manager. If it became known externally that a major client suddenly canceled, it could lead to strange rumors. At worst, it could affect our bank's credibility.
William, go persuade that client to stop the cancellation right now.
Dave commanded me with a pale face. That's impossible. I'm already leaving. I've informed the customer as well.
Then, have someone else go and negotiate.
Dave commanded the other bankers, but everyone balked at the unreasonable order. I'm quitting anyway, so I'm not afraid of what he says. In that invincible state, I felt no fear towards Dave. If you don't want the cancellation, branch manager Dave should go directly. If you care about the branch's reputation, you, as the manager, should negotiate. Dave looked at me with wide eyes, as if he hadn't expected me to talk back.
There's no need for me to step in.
Dave admits he's good at putting on a sales smile, but not so much at customer service. In that case, albeit reluctantly, please respect the customer's wishes. If you try to retain them forcibly, you might anger them and lose their trust. My advice seemed to hit home, as Dave thought for a moment, then clicked his tongue.
Well, we have other major clients. Losing one isn't a big deal.
Dave's attitude irked me. How could he speak like that when we're entrusted with the customer's significant funds? I nearly blurted out my farts. Dave didn't try to empathize with the customer, prioritizing the branch's sales and his own evaluation instead. All of us expressed our anger towards Dave.
What's with those looks? If you defy me, the branch manager, I'll make sure your evaluations suffer.
Dave glared at us, sensing our expressions. I stepped up to confront Dave. Since I'm leaving, I'll speak my mind. Frankly, your management style is harassment, increasing unnecessary paperwork, extending everyone's overtime, and intimidating the younger staff into submission. Please stop such terrible practices.
Just because you're leaving, you think you can speak insolently? Even after you're gone, I can make your life difficult socially.
Dave showed hostility, glaring at me. A tense standoff began between us. Then, an banker ran over.
Excuse me, has anyone received a credit card from a customer?
What? According to the banker, a major client, an investor, had come to the branch for counter service. They had handed over their credit card during the procedures and forgotten to take it back. Realizing this just after leaving the bank, they hurried back. Then we must return it quickly. Does anyone recall receiving it? No one stepped forward. It seemed no one had any recollection. Dave was nowhere to be seen, having disappeared somewhere. While the customer was waiting, those of us who were free began to search for the card. However, despite looking in every nook and cranny of the bank, we couldn't find it, and the customer became increasingly anxious. This is a mess. Who lost it? Our search for the card was becoming increasingly difficult when another unfortunate event occurred.
William, the auditor is here.
What? at this busy time. To our surprise, an auditor from headquarters had arrived. Neither I nor anyone else had been informed of this during this morning's briefing. Dave was likely the only one who knew, but he was nowhere to be found.
What's going on here?
The auditor looked suspicious of our situation. I explained the circumstances in Dave's absence. Then he suggested that the security cameras could identify who handled it. We quickly reviewed the surveillance footage with security, and there was Dave seen taking the card. Strictly speaking, another banker was initially handling the customer. However, Dave took the card while the banker was processing and for some reason placed it on top of some documents. Since the documents were still there, I immediately retrieved the card and returned it to the customer. After apologizing deeply, the customer, familiar with me, forgave us with a smile. The resolution of the incident had everyone sighing in relief. However, the question of why Dave had done such a thing still lingered. Then, the very person in question snuck back in. "Where have you been, branch manager? It was a mess here."
I had a bit of a stomachache, so I was in the bathroom.
Dave said, rubbing his stomach as if to sidestep the issue. When confronted with the security camera footage, proving Dave was the cause, he confessed readily.
I didn't do it on purpose. I just misunderstood and thought it was a customer's forgotten item. I panicked because I feared being caught, so I ran to the bathroom without thinking. Well, if the customer isn't mad, then I guess it's all good.
Despite causing a disruption in everyone's work, Dave was brazen about it. "Manager, look behind you."
Huh.
Prompted by me, he turned around.
Yikes.
What's yikes? Branch Manager Dave.
Upon making eye contact with the auditor, Dave visibly panicked, his legs shaking. "You knew he was coming, didn't you? Why didn't you inform us at the morning briefing?"
I forgot it.
As expected, I sighed in exasperation.
A communication mistake from the branch manager, I see.
At that remark, Dave turned pale. This situation was probably bad for him. After losing a major client worth $100 million and causing a disruption in the banker's work due to his own actions, and with the auditor confirming it via security cameras, there was no escaping the blame. If this blunder became known to headquarters, his evaluation would plummet, endangering his career advancement. Sweating profusely, Dave nervously clasped his hands.
There's still time until the end of the business day. We will discuss this after closing, so please continue with your usual duties until then.
Yes. Afterward, the auditor checked our work and ensured that transactions were conducted fairly. During this time, Dave had none of his usual yelling and pressure. He was like a cat that had encountered a stronger animal in its territory, scared and subdued. If only he was always this subdued, we could work without feeling on edge, making our jobs easier. I even wished someone from headquarters would visit every day. As closing time arrived and all the customers had left, we began the closing tasks.
By the way, William, you're retiring today, aren't you? Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Your performance is well known at headquarters. You're considered the top salesman among the bankers.
My hard work was appreciated by the headquarters. I was embarrassed to learn that.
I've observed your customer service as well, and truly, with your wealth of experience, It was exemplary.
Thank you. I'm truly honored to hear that. Dave, not pleased with me being praised, intruded between me and the auditor with a sleazy grin. He smiled a crude smile, trying to get in the auditor's way.
His good customer service is all thanks to my guidance.
Dave has consistently taken credit for others' hard work. However, someone objected to his claim.
That's not true. William's customer service has been excellent even before the branch manager transferred here.
A junior banker refuted Dave's statement. Following that, one by one, other bankers began voicing their objections against Dave.
The reason William is resigning is also because of the branch manager. He made William apologize and recorded it on his phone.
The auditor rolled his eyes. Exposed by his bankers, Dave was terribly flustered.
Are all of you ganging up to blame me?
Yes, we are.
Everyone nodded vigorously. Dave realized that no one in the room was there to defend him. The auditor calmly grasped the situation and spoke to Dave.
Branch Manager Dave, please show me the video. You mentioned of someone's apology.
Hesitant to hand over his cell phone, as even he couldn't believe it.
If you refuse, that action will also be entered into the investigation report. It will be considered an act of distrust towards headquarters.
Under his silent pressure, Dave eventually took out his cell phone and played the video saved on his phone. Seeing myself in the video filled me with embarrassment and shame. The auditor, watching the video silently, muttered, "This is terrible."
This is clear harassment. I'll also submit this video to headquarters.
Oh no.
Dave seemed to be already shocked, but I pressed on further. Branch manager, now is the time to denounce everything you've done to us.
What? Hey, stop it. Please.
I exposed his daily misconduct to the auditor. I wasn't the only one harassed by Dave. Dumping work on others, excessive quotas, and verbal abuse causing mental distress to bankers, I spilled all the hardships we endured from Dave.
Hey, William, I was wrong. Please, stop it.
Dave is completely weak and begs for forgiveness. He is terrified that he will be removed from his position as branch manager. It's not just me you should apologize to. Please apologize to everyone here. Dave's pride prevented him from apologizing. Fed up with such a person, I strengthened my tone. Apologize from the bottom of your heart.
Damn, eck.
Dave, with a pained voice, trembled and bowed to each person one by one.
I'm very sorry.
He stands in front of his subordinates and apologizes. It was an act of humiliation for Dave. But if one has wronged others, apologizing is only natural. After apologizing to everyone, Dave had tears in his eyes, his face flushed.
Does this mean you forgive me?
Like a abandoned puppy, the auditor coldly declared.
Just because you apologize doesn't mean your sins are erased. I will report everything to headquarters.
Dave collapsed on the spot, kneeling and sobbing. After the auditor completed the investigation at the branch and compiled the report for headquarters, Dave was soon called to headquarters, and in the meantime, the deputy manager took charge of the branch as acting manager. And the story I heard from a junior went like this. That video served as evidence of harassment, and the branch manager was demoted. Dave was demoted from branch manager to a regular banker. For someone who climbed to the position of branch manager, to fall to a regular banker was unprecedented. But it showed the extent of Dave's misdeeds. The incident became known throughout all branches, and all managers were required to undergo compliance training. It turns out Dave had harassed bankers at his previous branch too. Prompted by this incident, one of the bankers from the previous branch spoke out. A banker who was harassed, forced to work overtime, and ended up hospitalized due to the stress. It also came to light that Dave became a branch manager by taking credit for that person's work, making the situation far more serious than imagined. Dave was set to be transferred to another branch as a demotion, but with things having come this far, the CEO had lost faith in Dave and decided to fire him. The HR personnel and executives who recommended Dave for the branch manager position were also held accountable and received salary cuts as punishment. The bank, having failed to see through Dave's misconduct and character, was sued by the families of the bankers for harassment actions, facing demands for a large sum in damages. From being a high-earning branch manager, Dave suddenly found himself at rock bottom. And yet, Dave's punishment didn't end there. The video of me being forced to apologize somehow leaked to the internet. My face and the background were blurred to obscure the location and the people involved, but the voice off-screen was immediately recognizable as Dave's. Soon after, the internet spread it, and Dave's face and identity were swiftly exposed. The final blow was when Dave's address and family details were leaked. His wife and children left him, and even his parents disowned him. As a result, Dave ended up completely alone, unable to find decent work, living in a rundown apartment, haunted by nightmares. While I find the fervor of online vilification terrifying, realizing it was retaliation from those Dave had tormented made me sever ties with him for good. After resigning, I transitioned from being a banker to owning a cafe. I had always harbored a strong desire to run a cafe while working at the bank. Leaving the bank was the push I needed to pursue the job I always wanted to try. Despite being a small establishment, it turned out close to my ideal, and fulfilling this dream brought me immense joy. Although my income has decreased, I've been liberated from the grueling workload and pressure, living a fulfilling life that blends hobby with work. It's been years since I've had the leisure to brew coffee slowly. Remarkably, upon opening, customers I had served in the past, having heard I started a cafe, came to support me by enjoying a cup of coffee. Among them were professionals in business management, who offered advice and even support. Maintaining connections with these customers after resigning feels like a reward for my service efforts. I am once again glad that I did my best and continued to work as a banker. I offered my coffee to the customers, hoping they would become regulars.
Aren't you embarrassed by your low education? It really shows where you come from. I'd love to see what your parents look like.
I went to the final interview at a major company, and the interviewer, comparing his prestigious educational background to mine, insulted me for my lower education. It seems he's quite proud of his graduation from Harvard. I understood. I'll introduce them to you. One cannot judge someone's abilities merely by their appearance or education. The interviewer could never have imagined. He would not have expected that a thoughtless comment out of his pride would have resulted in him strangling himself. On day in September, I was challenging the final interview at a company. It was a moment where the results of my life and studies were being tested. Of course, just because I passed the final interview doesn't mean everything in life will go smoothly, nor is this the goal. But in a way, it's the culmination of my life so far.
So, John Smith, right? You want to join our company?
Fanning his resume like a fan, the interviewer glanced at me briefly. It was a displeasing look, as if he was assessing my worth. The interviewer's name was Taylor. I had seen him in the first and second interviews, but I just couldn't get along with him. Yes, your company is my top choice. My goal is to join your company and be involved in major projects that move society, I said, looking straight into Taylor's eyes.
Ha!
As if he couldn't hold back, Taylor snorted through his nose. Then he casually threw my resume on the table, leaned back in his chair, and looked up at the ceiling. Crossing his legs, Taylor looked down on me and let out a conspicuous click of his tongue.
Some people really have the wrong idea.
And that is...
Don't you get it? You didn't graduate from a prestigious university, did you? We're from XYZ University. No, I never heard of it.
Saying that, Taylor put his feet on the table. The muddy soles of his shoes rested on my resume. The mud stuck to the white paper. It's just where the photo of my face and the school I graduated from are on my resume.
Well, I'm a Harvard grad, you know. Ever heard of Harvard?
Of course.
Right. Even someone with your education knows it. Though I guess for you, getting in would have been a pipe dream.
His voice was laced with barely concealed scorn. No, he probably had no intention of hiding his disdain. I'm sure Tyler recognized me as someone he could mock. Sometimes you meet people like this. They judge others solely by their education and think it's okay to say anything if they consider them inferior. I don't like people like that very much. It's true that my alma mater's rank isn't the highest, but I've always studied hard since I was young, and my grades.
Grades or whatever, that's not the point. I'm now talking about academic background. If you want to climb to the top in our company, education is crucial. To not be looked down upon by our clients. Harvard grads like me are valued the most.
What is he trying to say? Watching me fall silent, Taylor's unpleasant smile grew stronger.
Someone with low education like you, sorry to say, might just end up at the bottom forever.
The words that followed were unbearable. He went on about how superior he was, how he had contributed to the company, none of which needed to be discussed in an interview. By the time I was thoroughly fed up, Taylor finally took his feet off the table.
Do you really think you can make it in this company?
Yes, I've thoroughly prepared and studied for this. Definitely.
Seriously? Are you still dreaming like this? You think this is some kind of comedy club audition?
He didn't even try to hide his mockery and disdain. How can someone raised in what kind of home turn out like this? I could tell I was being looked down upon. It didn't feel good. This takes me back to when I was just a kid. Life has its ways of bringing people together. And fortune has its ups and downs. At that time, my family, or rather I should say, we were in what you'd call rock bottom. We had no money, no food, nothing to put on the table for side dishes, and everything I wore or used for school, from clothes to study materials, was second-hand. I felt shabby because of my situation, often ridiculed for being poor, and it was shameful not being able to talk back. Looking back, my parents must have had it even harder than me. They must have felt terrible not being able to provide proper meals. Back then, I was struggling and hungry every day, and I couldn't see the sacrifices my parents were making. But at some point, food started appearing more often on our table, and I got new clothes for the first time.
Just hang in there a little longer. I'll make more money. Then we can eat all the good food we want.
I remember my dad patting my head and saying that. Our living standards improved after my dad started his own business. He worked late every night, sometimes staying at the company for days to get the business on track. So, can we go out this weekend? I'd like to go to the amusement park.
The amusement park, God. Go with your mom. Sorry, but I've got work that day too.
As our family became wealthier, my dad came home less and less. He was always busy with work, even on weekend. Ironically, the better our life got, the less time we spent together as a family. Eventually, my dad didn't come back home. His company had grown.
I'm sorry. This is a crucial time for me.
I silently watched my dad pack his suitcase and leave. From that day, it was just me and my mom at home. My dad was so busy. He only came home once or twice a year. By the time I was in high school, it had been almost 2 years since his last visit. Your dad is a busy manual, my mom said so, but she looked lonely. Seeing my mom like that and my dad not coming home, I made up my mind. I wouldn't be a workaholic like my dad. I wanted to be someone who could take care of his family. When I entered high school, I started to study and take lessons in various subjects. Luckily, my family was wealthy. I could learn anything I wanted. I studied art. I had a tutor for my studies. I also attended Spanish classes and gathered a lot of reference books. All the money for this came from my dad. And the more I studied and gained knowledge, the more I understood how much effort my dad had put into starting his business and keeping it running. It wasn't a trivial struggle. It was so intense he barely had time to come home. But still, I couldn't come to admire him for that. He chose the work over his family. I didn't want to be like that. This feeling grew stronger day by day. My mom must have noticed how I felt about my dad. But she supported me without saying anything. She said, "Do what you want to do." She pushed me forward.
Knowing it would be tough, why did you go to such a low-ranked college?
The interview with Taylor had ceased to be an interview long ago. It had degenerated into nothing more than an occasion for Taylor to mock my educational background. In the interview room, the two of us, Taylor and me, had no one there to stop his relentless ridicule. Honestly, I thought about just leaving then and there. But I had compelling reasons for wanting to join this company. And it was those reasons alone that kept me seated in this interview. I really wanted to study a certain subject, and I chose that university because it was close to my house. It's just my mom and me, so I didn't feel like going too far.
Study a subject. You should have focused on getting a better degree. That's why you'll always be at the bottom, you know.
I, the wise one, will teach a fool like you. His voice was dripping with such intent. I don't think so. I believe what matters more than one's educational background is what one does after joining a company.
Ah, There are always people like you who are mistaken.
Am I mistaken?
Yes, severely mistaken. Really, what kind of life must one lead to arrive at such a conclusion?
Saying this, Taylor picked up my resume again. He turned to the section on family and traced his finger over my parents' names.
Didn't your parents try to stop you? Tell you to go to a better university?
He tapped on my parents' names with his finger, over and over, as if to emphasize his point.
Ah, were your parents also poorly educated? Well, that explains it.
I wanted to say that it had nothing to do with them. I thought it wouldn't make any difference, so I refrained from saying anything back.
Ah, this is amusing. It's a pity we probably won't meet again. I really wanted to see the face of someone with uneducated parents.
I understood Taylor's way of thinking. I could see that he was an academic snobism, and he wanted to see my parents' faces, too. I understood.
What? You're mistaken choosing. It's too late to do anything about your low education, isn't it?
Not that. You want to see my parents' face, right?
Who? What are you talking about? I'm busy, you know.
It was true. He was busy. After all, the company Tyler works for, Smith Corporation, where I hope to join, has an annual turnover exceeding $3 billion. They were planning to start a new venture next year. I knew he was busy preparing for that. It won't take long. Let's go meet him. I also want to see my dad's face. It's been a while. The elevator ascended swiftly to the upper floors. Watching the floor indicator, Taylor looked puzzled.
Hey, John, where are we heading for?
Don't you know what room is on the upper floors of your own company? It was a question loaded with implication, wondering if Taylor was aware.
It's not that, but ahead lies.
Before Taylor could finish his sentence, the elevator arrived at the designated floor, the top floor of the headquarters building of Smith Corporation. There was only one room there, the CEO's office. In other words, this is the room at the top of a large company with annual sales of $3 billion.
Do you realize where you are?
I know. As the elevator doors opened, Taylor, inadvertently stepping into the CEO's office, turned pale. He reached out to stop me, but I avoided his hand and stepped into the CEO's office.
Who is it? Oh.
Long time no see, Dad. Looks like you're as busy as ever.
John, oh, today was your final interview, right?
Dad.
Taylor's face visibly paled even more. Sweat drenched from his forehead down to his chin. The CEO, my dad, turned his gaze towards Taylor.
You're from HR, right?
Yes. Sir, today, I was in charge of interviewing your son, and
Taylor's words trailed off into a whisper. It must have dawned on him too late. The person he had been belittling for his low education was the son of the CEO of the company he worked for. Yes, Tyler told me a lot of interesting stories. Taylor flinched as if scared. He kept his gaze down, trying to escape my dad's look. A single drop of sweat fell from his nose onto the carpet.
Well, you're Tyler, right? Thank you for bringing my son up here.
My dad said this in an emotionless voice.
Oh, no. Your son is very bright and,
He has always been hard working with his studies and lessons. Now, I would like to have a word alone with my son if you don't mind stepping out. We'll take care of the rest.
Oh, of course, sir. I'll excuse myself then.
A boat on the way over, or a thread of clouds hanging over hell. Tyler nodded repeatedly at my dad's words and rushed into the elevator. He likely couldn't wait to get out of there. He kept his head down the whole time as he descended to the lower floors. He never once made eye contact with me or my dad again.
Is he not feeling well? He seemed a bit off.
Well, not so much unwell. Probably just embarrassed.
I don't quite follow, but well, it's all right.
With that, my dad cut off the conversation and let out a deep sigh, as if releasing something pent up inside. He then motioned for me to join him on the sofa.
Let's talk for a bit.
Is there something to talk about? I know you've been working hard for me and Mom. I said this as I took a seat opposite my dad. This situation of a newly interviewed employee candidate having a conversation with the CEO in his office made me feel slightly amused. Such a scenario isn't something you'd find just anywhere in the world.
Indeed, but I still wanted to apologize.
Apologize? For what? My tone was sharper than I intended. It seems I haven't forgiven my dad as much as I thought I had. Sensing my feelings, my dad gave a troubled smile.
For everything, up until now.
My dad sighed again. Then he apologized to me. Even if it was for you and your mom, I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you. I think I've made you and your mom feel very lonely. Yes, my mom and I were always lonely. Even after we moved to a larger house, I had no worries about food or clothes, and I could take lessons in anything I wanted. Our living standards improved. But my mom and I were always lonely. I was lamenting the fact that we couldn't spend time together as a family. I always dreamed of going to the amusement park with my dad, mom, and me together when I was a child. Every time I saw classmates holding hands with their parents on the way home, I felt a tightness in my chest. My mom would always say, "Be patient." I still remember the loneliness in her voice. I'll never forget it for as long as I live. After all this time, you left us alone and we're just working.
You're right to feel that way. I was concerned about you guys in my own way. But yeah, you wouldn't have noticed.
My dad scratched his head as if it couldn't be helped. Concerned. How can you be concerned when you were always away on business trips?
Yeah, I suppose. But it's true. It might sound like an excuse, but…
That's when my dad mentioned several names. They were the names of the tutors and the classes I had been attending. Huh?
I was keeping an eye on you in my own way. I dropped by the classes or the tutors to ask how you were doing.
Then why?
Sounds a bit sappy, right? When I heard from your mom that you wanted to start a new hobby, I was the one looking up suitable classes or seminars.
My dad laughed, saying it even though it was unspoken. His sad laugh made my heart ache a little.
Well, it wasn't just for you. It was for the company too.
For the company?
Yes. A company is ultimately about connections between people. For example, the tutoring center you attended is mostly funded by our company.
It seems I was unaware, but my dad had been doing fatherly things in his own way. Did my mom know about this? She probably did. And she must have kept silent because my dad asked her to. So she never told me,
It was a good tutoring center, right? It would be a waste for such a place to go under. Now, even the kids of our employees get a bit of a discount there.
Essentially, it was business. The actions of a CEO of a large corporation. But behind those actions was hidden affection for me. Using company funds to overtly favor me would have been inappropriate given his position. Perhaps this was the only way he could fulfill both roles as CEO and as a dad. Right now, I don't care about the company. At least, I understand that I've grown up with my dad's support behind the scenes. You could have just told me. I've been working hard, thinking I'd surprise you by how much I've grown. My eyes felt hot, slightly teary. I looked down to hide my moist eyes.
I know. I knew you were working hard.
My dad's large hand rested on my head. My dad stroked my head as if I were a little boy. How long has it been since I've been patted on the head like this? I realize now, I always wanted my dad to pat my head again. The misunderstanding between us cleared up effortlessly, as if the years of estrangement meant nothing.
So, what do you want to do? I know you're doing well. You don't have to work at our company if you don't want to.
About that, I still want to work here.
Oh.
I've realized you're a respectable person. I was mistaken. The misunderstanding was my dad's fault, but he had been watching over me in his own way. It was just knowing that I made all the effort to stay until the final interview worthwhile. I want to be like you, so please let me learn here at the company. I said that, and my dad replied pleasedly, I understood. By the way, I want to change the subject. Now that I had the chance to sit down and talk with my dad, or rather, the CEO, there was something else I wanted to discuss.
Something on your mind.
My dad straightened up and leaned in to look at my face. Looking into my eyes, he sensed it was time for a serious conversation. There's something I want to talk about. It's about Taylor, who was in charge of my interview earlier. I told my dad about Taylor's actions. He was arrogant, inappropriate for an interviewer, put his foot on my resume, was an academic snobism, and made comments that mocked me and my parents. After hearing everything, my dad stroked his chin, making a troubled face. Then he stood up from the reception seat and picked up a document from the massive pile on his desk.
I'd like to keep this between us, but there have been reports about his work behavior.
It seems Taylor has been falsely claiming business outings for personal leisure, repeatedly engaging in bullying and harassment, taking company property home without permission, and leaking confidential information.
Indeed, he has a high education, but he seems to be quite dishonest. I shouldn't be talking to you about this.
No, I kind of thought he might be that kind of person.
Well, I'll handle it from here. Thanks for letting me know.
My dad said so, placing the document back on the table and adopting a serious expression.
Listen, John, it may be redundant for me to say this, but there's something I want you to remember.
What's that?
Be sincere. To lead and inspire others, being trusted is paramount. Remember that, and you can rise from the depths, just as I did.
My dad's face was lined with fine wrinkles. It had been a while since I looked at my dad's face so closely. Each wrinkle seemed to speak of the hardships he had endured. Later, I was informed that Taylor had been fired. Subsequently, I joined my dad's company as a new employee. Starting from the bottom, of course. Being the CEO's son didn't afford me any special treatment, nor did I want it from my colleagues or superiors. Like my dad used to do, I want to build my career from scratch on my own. Whether I can become as respectable a CEO as my dad is still uncertain. Embarrassingly, it was only after entering the workforce that I truly understood the challenges of working. However, that was in the early years. Now I've grown accustomed to the work, and it feels as though I've reached my dad's stature, if only by the tips of my fingers.
Heard you led another project to success. The rumors about you being the next CEO are getting louder.
My colleague, Michael, slapped my shoulder. He was a friend who never changed his attitude towards me, even after knowing I was the CEO's son. If I were to become the next CEO, he's exactly the kind of person I'd want on my team. It was all thanks to everyone's cooperation. Yes, it's a load off my shoulders. The past few months had been hectic, with hardly any time for a break. Now, with the project's success, I could finally take some well-deserved time off. I quickly packed my things into my bag, ready to leave on time.
You seem happy. Got a date?
No, it's not a date. My family and I are having dinner together at home tonight. My dad must already be at home, waiting with my mom in the house where I grew up.
Oh, you're early. I thought you'd be late.
Arriving home, I found my dad in the living room. But my mom was not there. Where's Mom?
She went to shopping. We ran out of some seasonings.
I see. Should I start preparing dinner? She shouldn't be long if she just went out for seasonings. In the kitchen, vegetables and meat were neatly arranged on plates. It seems tonight's dinner will be chicken stew.
Seems like you've been busy with the project lately.
Yeah? How about you, Dad?
Easy for me. The young ones have grown up, and now I can relax at home like this.
A few years after I joined the company, which is to say, at the beginning of this year, my dad finally stopped his long commutes. He's getting on in years. It seems he's started to prepare for retirement, leaving the management of the company to his employees. His charisma, which he has cultivated, has not diminished, and he must not be as laid back as he says. It's good if you can relax. I deliberately don't point it out. I understand now that my dad is not one to complain or show weakness, given his reserved nature.
I'm managing to relax. That's what I've been working towards all these years, after all.
Then I'm glad. My dad's efforts have finally paid off. Now it's my turn. Like him, I want to be someone admired by many. Moreover, I want to create an environment where I can truly value my family without being consumed by work. I don't have anyone to be my partner at the moment.
I'd like to see my grandchildren soon.
You know, saying that could be considered harassment these days. Oops, I'll have to be careful then. He jokes, laughing lightly. The sound of the front door signals someone's arrival. It seems my mom has come back.
Hey, do you guys really think that's okay? Sales is all about numbers. Damn it. Seriously, what the hell are you all doing? Especially you there, Parker. I mean, come on, you've only 5 contracts this month.
I'm sorry. But I closed 25 contracts last month.
You're really incompetent. You know that. Seriously, a high school graduate is a whole different level. High school graduates are completely useless nowadays. Who even drops out of high school these days?
Well, that's because there were circumstances that I had to.
I don't care about your reasons. You were a bad boy or too dumb to even go to college, right? You're really embarrassing. You know that.
Damn. I'm the one getting a severe scolding from the boss right now. I'm John Parker. I'm 35 years old. Last month, I closed a lot of contracts, but this month I haven't been able to close many. Our company's sales department is tough with a boss who's like a strict drill sergeant, so it's always tense. The boss's shouts are always flying around, and when he gets irritated, he tears up sheets of copy paper. It's like an evil spirit possesses him. No, maybe he's actually a demon, so maybe we should get an exorcist. Anyway, when the boss's mood sours, he immediately takes it out on everyone. He was pretty harsh on me. As the boss Nelson said, I'm a high school graduate. Even though I only graduated from high school, there's a reason for it. And it's not like I was a bad boy or too dumb to get into college. I was rather serious and quiet, and I even had good grades. The simple reason I couldn't go to college was that my family was extremely poor. The level of poverty in my family was such that we were no longer living below the welfare level. We weren't actually receiving welfare, but watching programs about welfare on TV. I thought, whoa, we're better off than them. We were a family of 5, living with my parents and 3 children. But since it was difficult to have 3 proper meals a day, the children filled their stomachs with school lunches. Our meals at home were simple, just something like soup and bread. It feels like I've gone back several decades. There was a class at school where we experienced meals from the past. We ate a dish made of wheat flour and sweet potato vines, boiled together. Everyone said it wasn't tasty, but for me, it was a feast. From that moment on, I realized my family was different from everyone else's. Due to poverty, I couldn't even dream of going to college, so I had no choice but to work after graduating from high school. My parents aren't very well enough, so I can't let them work anymore. And I wanted to give my younger siblings a better life, so I wasn't ashamed to work after high school. But now that I've become a working adult, everyone around me at least has a college degree. And especially in our company, everyone has a college degree. In other words, I was the only high school graduate. Even though everyone else doesn't have good sales performance, the boss doesn't lecture them for 3 hours. It's just me who gets taken to a separate room and lectured for 3 hours. I thought if I could use that time for work, it would be more efficient, but if I said that, he'd get angry, so I kept quiet. One day, it was decided that our company's president would retire. It was a sudden announcement, so everyone was surprised. The president seemed to have been suffering from a lung disease for some time, and it appears he judged that he could no longer work physically. He did seem to struggle when passing by, and since he's getting up there in age, he probably wants to take it easy. The president will turn 70 next year. At that age, he would retire and relax on the porch, or do some gardening in the yard for a change of pace. After his retirement was decided, a party was held for the inauguration of the new president. No one knows who the new president is yet. We'll find out at the venue, and everyone seems excited.
Hey, you know, what if the new boss is me? There's a chance, right? I'm talented, and it'd be a waste not to make me boss. I'm like a 1 in 1,000 level genius. You know, I might even get promoted to president. Well, can't help it, I'm a genius, you know.
Yeah, I see.
But it'll be a problem, huh? Then who will take over sales department? There aren't many people who can work like me, you know. And there are problem children too, like you, Parker.
Me? Am I the problem?
Of course you are. You're always giving me headaches. I don't want to complain every single day. You're the one who makes me irritated. You know, my blood pressure has gone up because of you.
Even if you say that. The boss was quite overweight, so he thought it was because of that his blood pressure was high. It's not like I'm the one irritating him. Besides, the boss indulges in sweets, rich foods, spicy things, and so on. So it's no wonder his blood pressure is high. He might end up with heart failure or even diabetes. It wouldn't be surprising. I wondered why everything had to be blamed on me. And it's somewhat pitiful how he half-jokingly thinks he'll be promoted to president. The boss thinks he's competent at his job, but from my perspective, he's not at all. I have no idea why he became the boss in the first place. What he does is occasionally take me to a separate room and cram me in for about 3 hours, then go out to get contracts, talk on the phone with young employees who are out in the field, rip up sheets of copy paper wastefully, and then polish his shoes and fix his hair. Let's leave aside the shoe polishing. They say business starts from the ground up, and having dirty shoes gives off an unclean impression. But it was comical to me that he was combing his scanty hair. The boss is only 40 years old, but his head is balding. He is looking desperately in the hand mirror, trying to hide his baldness with his few hairs. He says to me, "Hey, you have too little hair. You're in your 30s, but dang, that's bad. But I just have thin hair." It seems like my hair texture hasn't changed much since birth. It's still fine like a baby's hair. So my hair looks less frequent and softer, so it's flat. The boss says it makes me look bald. Then what about you? I thought, but I can say that with my mouth torn open. If I did, it might blow up our company, like Mount Vesuvius erupted and destroyed Pompeii. I genuinely felt that way. The inauguration party for the president is on the first Sunday of next month. We are renting a huge hall in the city for it. All the employees will gather there, but my boss has been half-jokingly talking about what he'll do when he becomes the new president ever since then. I'll definitely put you at ease. That's absolutely not going to happen. I wanted to say, but if I did, Mount Vesuvius in his head would definitely erupt. No matter what, I thought it was best to just endure it, thinking that if I pushed back, I'd lose. On the day of the new president's inauguration party, I was dressed to the best suit, and I headed from home to the hall. Since I had plenty of time, I killed time at a Starbucks near the venue. I had spread out some documents, so I looked like a capable businessman. Sometimes I'd think it was painful to see people trying to act cool with their MacBook at Starbucks, but maybe I was one of them. However, on that day in particular, I was filled with a strange sense of excitement. As it was getting late, I left Starbucks and headed to the hall. Everyone was gathered, and I met some people who had been transferred to other departments after a long time. Those who had been moved to the planning department said they were getting a much better environment than in sales, and I thought they must have all disliked Nelson. And I wandered around the hall looking for my seat, but I couldn't find it. There should have been a chair with a paper attached to the back with my name on it, so I could easily find it, but there was no chair with my name on it. I thought it might be a mistake and kept looking, but since there was none, someone must have forgotten after all. As I was at a loss, my boss, Nelson, came over. Nelson looked at me with a grin.
You're looking for your seat, aren't you? But there's no seat for you.
Wait, hold on. What do you mean by that?
I'm telling you, there's no seat for you. We don't need someone with a low education level here. Everyone is a college graduate, so having a high school graduate like you would be weird, right? You're out of place with your low education, so go home.
Oh, I see. Got it. Then I'll leave.
Since you're nothing to do at home, go to the office and do some work, and make sure to clean everyone's desks.
The boss laughed out loud, looking pleased with himself. I couldn't understand why he found it so amusing. I can't understand the mentality of finding joy in belittling others to this extent, but oh well. The mind of a nasty person is too messy and crazy for the average person to understand. And in the first place, trying to understand or empathize with them would be wrong. I've tried to understand the boss several times before and even attempted to compromise, but I've decided that I can't get along with him anymore. From here on, it's based on what I heard from Roberts in the sales department. The inauguration party for the new president started, and the executive vice president made a speech first. Then, each department head gave a speech. Nelson, the head of the sales department, tried to boast about himself by telling blatant lies. For example, he claimed to have secured contracts brought in by other young employees as if he had obtained them himself, trying to curry favor with the higher-ups. He also claimed to be concerned about the mental health of the employees and said he was even counseling them, portraying himself as a good boss. But that was all a lie. We were always grilled and shouted at by Nelson. As for me, I was taken to a separate room for 3 hours, forced to bow my head, and subjected to a full course of yelling. The sales department folks apparently listened with a sense of resignation. However, when the executive vice president said, "Finally, let's have the new president take the stage," it fell silent. No matter how much time passed, the new president didn't show up. So, the executive vice president loudly called out the new president's name.
President Sean. Where's President Sean Parker?
Huh?
President Parker, where on earth have you gone? You were supposed to announce your presidency in front of everyone today, but you could be late. Nelson, do you know anything?
Well.
President Parker is the new president. He was in the sales department, right? He's the new president.
Oh, I sent him home.
Huh?
Well, because he's poorly educated, I told him to leave. I didn't think he was the new president.
Nelson looked pale. Roberts saw sweat dripping from Nelson's head, making his few remaining strands of hair soaked. Furthermore, he was trembling and seemed to be bracing himself for being shouted at by the executive vice president. As expected, the executive vice president was furious and confronted Nelson.
What on earth did you do? He's the new president, and if he's not here, this party is meaningless.
Well,
First of all, what do you mean by telling him to leave because he's poorly educated? Are you only able to judge people based on their education?
no, that's not it.
However, that sales department folks snitched on the executive vice president about how Nelson always criticized and bullied me for my education. And then the executive vice president was furious.
I see. So, Nelson, you are someone who can only see people based on their education.
No, that's not it.
Do you really think high school graduates are at the bottom?
Well, to be honest, sometimes I do think they're at the bottom. I mean, high school graduates are either dumb or delinquents, right?
Is that so? So, did you think I was at the bottom too?
What?
Actually, I'm also a high school graduate. My family was poor, so I couldn't afford to go to college. Maybe I could have gone to college if I had tried various means, but I didn't want to go to college if it meant causing trouble or worry for my parents.
I really respect you, Executive Vice President. You have a great record coming from the sales department, and you're even implementing advanced initiatives for safety education within the company. I think you're a very admirable person. So,
Then, how am I different from President Parker?
it's nothing.
I also learned for the first time at that moment that the executive vice president was also a high school graduate. I had always assumed he was a college graduate. When we had a hobby conversation before, he said he liked reading, but he said he liked genres of books that I couldn't understand. It is a philosophy book. He mentioned Sartre and Foucault, but I had no idea what he was talking about. He explained a little, but it was too difficult, and I mostly forgot it. So I had just assumed he was a smart person who graduated from the literature department or something. But it seems the executive vice president's family was also quite poor, and he couldn't go to a college either. I reflected on the fact that I had been judging people based on preconceptions. I wasn't necessarily belittling people based on preconceptions, but it's true that it's important to see through to the essence of people. Especially if I were to become the new president, it would be even more crucial. Nevertheless, I doubt Nelson ever imagined I would become the new president. Upon learning that I was the one who would become the new president, it seemed like everyone was looking at him with suspicion. Roberts from the sales department seemed to be smirking as he watched. By the way, Roberts is a college graduate, but he's a good guy who gets along well with me. It's not like everyone in the sales department hated me just because I only graduated from high school. If anything, everyone in the sales department seemed to dislike Nelson. That's because, as I mentioned earlier, he's like a strict drill sergeant. Among them, he was particularly tough on me, but Roberts was the one who got yelled at after me, so we comforted each other at the bar. Nelson ended up being looked at with suspicion by everyone. He never thought things would turn out like this just because he insulted me and sent me away for being poorly educated. The party ended abruptly, and it seems the executive vice president went home angry. I grinned as I listened to the phone call from Roberts. Oh, I see. Thanks. Nelson probably never expected things to turn out like this.
Anyway, you are the president. I can't even speak casually anymore. Gotta use honorifics.
If it's a private conversation, you can use casual language. After all, we hang out together on holidays, right?
Thanks, but now it's about company matters, so I'll use honorifics from now on. How could you be the new president? Sure, the number of contracts before was impressive, but Nelson said it was terrible the other day.
Then I'll speak honorifically too. Oh, that thing. Well, there's a reason for it.
What's the reason? Did something sketchy happen in the deal?
No way, it's not like that. Actually, I secured a contract with NASA.
What? NASA?
Yes, you know how we develop and sell parts for airplanes. Right. Well, that NASA finally said they wanted our company's parts. When Nelson first received an inquiry email, he thought it was a prank. He apparently thought there was no way the real NASA would inquire, so he was planning to just ignore it. But I was convinced it was the real NASA. So I secretly went ahead with the business.
Wait, was it for that reason that you went on a business trip the other day?
Yeah, Nelson didn't know about that. He happened to be on a business trip at the same time. So, there's no way he could have known that I was consulting in NASA.
But, could you understand the technical terms of science? I mean, no offense, but you're only graduated from high school, right?
Oh, actually, my parents were that kind of scientist.
Huh?
Well, my father and mother specialize in the space field.
What? Seriously? I didn't know that. Oh, sorry, I forgot to use honorifics.
No, let's just talk normally. It's bothersome.
Right. Nobody is listening anyway. Hey, why didn't you tell me that before?
Nah, nobody bothers to say what their parents do, right? You don't say your parents are nurses or movie directors unless somebody asks you.
Yo, I guess you're right.
Well, you know, since I was a kid, hearing about space science and reading books helped.
That's awesome. Then it's not strange at all for you to become the new president. You can understand space science and even contract with NASA. That's amazing. But did Nelson not know about that?
Oh yeah, Nelson also overlooked me securing the contract with NASA. And it's a $500 million contract.
Nelson is seriously incompetent. He's always saying we're incompetent, but he's the real incompetent one.
Well, besides that, I've been working on the manual. I was asked by the executive vice president to do it because he knew I could understand space science.
Why did the executive vice president know?
Well, actually, I was surprised to find out after joining the company, but it seems the executive vice president was taught English by my grandpa.
Huh? Really?
Oh, the managing director came from Japan when he was little, and he couldn't speak English, so my grandfather taught him English. So the managing director had heard a lot about my parents.
I see.
Well, if you just look at my name, you'll see I'm a normal American, but the managing director knew I was their child from the beginning. So I was helping the managing director with his scientific manuals and systems.
Yep, exactly. It's amazing, right? Congratulations. Hey, will you still hang out with me off duty? Now that you're the president, we can't interact as equals anymore. Right?
What are you talking about? You and I are friends, aren't we? There might be a hierarchy at work, but as long as Roberts doesn't mind, let's hang out like we used to. After all, neither of us is popular.
Don't say sad things. Well, I haven't even thought about getting married yet.
With that, I finished the phone call with my good friend, Roberts. Roberts seems like a mischievous guy, but he often gets scolded by Nelson for making mistakes. But he's cheerful and friendly, and he's a good guy who's kind to me. Roberts was just amazed when he found out about the negotiations with NASA that I succeeded in and about my background. His good point is that he doesn't envy and then resent people. From now on at the company, Roberts and I will have a boss-subordinate relationship, but since we get along well, as long as he's okay with it, I plan to have him as a playmate during off hours. Anyway, I don't have a girlfriend and I'm bored. Plus, now that I've become the CEO, there ain't no time to be finding a girlfriend. Things have gotten so busy to the point where I barely have time to breathe. At the party, besides me and the X6, nobody knew who was gonna be the president until that day, but everyone would be shocked to find out it was me. Especially Nelson, since he thought I was just some incompetent, uneducated guy. But I've actually been handling various tasks and even nailed that NASA deal. Since the previous president resigned due to illness, we discussed who should take over, and I'm genuinely happy it was me. I never imagined becoming the president, especially considering I had been made to bow my head for 3 hours while being yelled at. So, I kicked off the new regime. The deal with NASA made the news and our sales skyrocketed even more. But in return, orders came pouring in from all over and production and sales couldn't keep up. Blaming Nelson, who caused many people to quit, the executive vice president said that such an intimidating and morally bankrupt guy should be demoted. Sure, the sales department gets about 15 newbies every year, but only about 3 brainwashed ones stick around after a year. So yeah, maybe I'm brainwashed too, but it means only those with a tough mentality can survive in the sales department. But that ain't good for the future. So, I demoted Nelson to a regular employee. He was crying and begging for forgiveness, but neither me nor anyone else was gonna forgive him.
I can't do this. Being demoted to a regular employee now, we've got a mortgage, car loan, and kids' education fees to pay.
Even if you say that, we can't just ignore the complaints from the sales department.
Yeah, the boss is right. Look, there are even this many anonymous postcards addressed to the president. These are from the suggestion box we have installed in the office.
Damn, what am I gonna do now? My life might as well be over.
Well then, I'm ordering you to work in Kansas State. They're short-staffed there, so get going.
What?
You know, Kansas State, it is a country town where the plains go all the way.
Wait a minute. Why is it so rural? Who cares if it's in the boonies?
Well, it's not just about working in Kansas State. You don't just do sales in that town. You have to go to neighboring states and cities.
No way, I hate this.
Nelson was screaming like he'd lost his mind. But considering how unfairly he treated us, he should just suck it up and deal with it. Well, in the end, he reluctantly accepted the gig in Kansas State. It's in the middle of nowhere, more like a tiny office than a branch. Just recently, 2 female sales reps at that branch quit for child care and elder care reasons, so he had to go and fill in the gaps. With Nelson's gone, the sales department's been running smoothly and our performance has improved even more. But we need to hire more people to keep up with production and sales. So I decided to hold an orientation to attract some top-notch talent. Of course, by top-notch, I don't mean just book smarts. It could be someone with a certification or even someone who's great at communication, even without a degree. We had folks show up for the orientation, not just young folks, but also young foreigners who want to work in the US. They studied English and culture at schools and colleges back home, so they probably know about American companies. Some jobs can be done with simple tasks, even if their English is not very good. I suggested to the young man, who could not speak English very well, that he should work in the factory. Turns out, he came from a poor country and has been hopping from job to job. He had a work visa and had been working in the US, but he got fired for not being able to use honorifics or write proper sentences. When I showed him the English manual I made, he read it with great interest. He was really interested and said he'd love to work here. I wanted to hire him, so I told him to come for the job interview. Then, several other folks showed up for our hiring test. It was pretty sudden, so I know HR must have been scrambling, but later on, I'll treat everyone to a fancy dinner at a top-notch restaurant. I begged them. HR folks were like, "Yay, the boss is so generous, and we'll do our best," and they scrambled to get everything ready for the test. There was even a young guy there who struggled with English. He looked a bit nervous and kept looking around. He came to apply for a position in the department that handles light assembly work at the factory, so we gave him a simple assembly test. Turns out, he put together the parts in no time flat. When I asked him in English, he said he used to work in a factory back in his home country and told me in broken English. In the English writing test, he scored full marks. Since his homeland also has English as an official language, it's natural for him to be proficient in English. With manuals available, even if he struggles with English, he should be able to handle his duties somehow. During the interview, I asked questions in English, and he responded with a lot of enthusiasm. So, I decided to hire him. In the end, we ended up hiring 500 people across all departments. We don't usually conduct such large-scale hiring event for new graduates, but if we don't do this, our future operations will suffer. The 500 newly hired individuals include second career professionals, mid-career hires, and foreigners, but they all have some skills or aspirations. I trust them and have started delegating tasks to them, one after another. Of course, my workload has inevitably increased, and I find myself working tirelessly, day and night. However, thanks to that, our company was able to secure contracts with renowned companies worldwide.
I'm glad we made you the president. You're truly remarkable, President Parker.
Oh, it's just a stroke of luck.
But you know, luck is part of ability, right? And everyone we hired is so hardworking and talented. We need to work even harder ourselves from now on.
You're right. We need to set a good example. At that moment, Robert stashed over. I froze, thinking there might be some trouble, but that wasn't the case.
Listen, we've received an order from the U.S. Department of Defense.
Huh.
What did you say?
It's a whopping $400 million.
Way to go, Roberts. That's amazing.
Isn't that incredible? What did you do?
Well, remember those materials President Parker made for NASA? I tweaked them a bit and made them for the U.S. Department of Defense. And I happened to have a chance to go drinking with someone from the U.S. Department of Defense, so I asked if they'd like to see a presentation, and they took the bait.
But you weren't good at scientific terms, were you?
Well, I wanted to be like President Parker, so I studied hard. Actually, I recently started dating a scientist girlfriend, and she's been teaching me a lot of knowledge.
What?
Sorry, President. I went ahead and took the initiative.
I see. Weren't President Parker and Roberts quite close? You two used to hang out a lot during their time in the sales department.
Yes, and we were scolded together too. We were the dynamic duo, scolded by the former our boss. But anyway, Roberts, that's not good. You can't just take unilateral actions.
Well, I went to a matchmaking event and met someone. We're actually considering marriage, so President, please come to the wedding. I'll invite you.
Oh, are you even thinking about marriage? It was a bit bitter that Roberts ran me through. But seeing him so happy, I decided to forgive him. Still, to secure a contract from the U.S. Department of Defense, Roberts must be quite a remarkable individual, just like me. I thought back to how he used to get scolded by Nelson just as much as I did. Nelson really didn't have an eye for talent. Sure, he may have been a bit of a show-off, but with careful guidance, he's someone who can do good work. Following Roberts' success, the sales department's performance skyrocketed. On one of my days off, I was told there was someone Roberts wanted me to meet and was brought to a cafe. Since it's our day off, we're speaking casually. So, who's the person you wanted me to meet today?
Well, you'll see when you meet her.
Well, okay. The person who appeared next was Roberts' girlfriend and her friend. She was stunningly beautiful, and I felt my face flush. I never imagined there could be such a beauty in this world.
She's interested. After I told her about you, I described you as a cool young president.
Hey, what are you saying without asking me first?
All right, it's a double date today.
And so, I was involuntarily thrust into a double date. To be honest, the person brought to me is my type, a perfect match. I secretly hope she'll become my girlfriend to enrich my personal life even more. If that happens, my life will be even more vibrant.